Educators across the country are rethinking how we address race and its impact on all areas of society in the classroom. One of the tools is critical race theory, but the topic has also turned many schools into battlegrounds over culture, race, identity, and history. Several states like Rhode Island and Missouri are considering bills that would stop schools from teaching more about concepts like sexism and racism. Joining us now to talk more about this is Okaikor Aryee-Price. She is an anti-racist organizer and steering committee member for Black Lives Matter at School. Okaikor, welcome. So great to have you with us. We are hearing the phrase critical race theory a lot these days, but I would venture that most people don't truly understand what it is. Can you explain what it is exactly?
Yes, hi. Thank you again for inviting me. Okaikor here. And critical race theory is something that came out of legal studies scholarship. It was originally not an education-based concept. It wasn't something that educators initially used. It came out of the legal studies. And critical race theory is a lens. It's just pretty much a lens that people use to analyze the ways that the legal system, our institutions, impact the lives of those who are people of color, who these laws were not initially meant for. But when we hear a lot about critical race studies right now, critical race theory, it's not something that is taught in schools. Like, people are thinking that this is something that's taught in schools. It really is a lens. It's a critical lens for how we examine these institutions and the laws and the ways that they impact people's lives. And so that's, it was built on this idea that race is permanent in this country. Racism is. That in order for those of us who are people of color, that we need to, in order to push back, there's the need for the counter narrative, and how counter narratives help us understand the full history of what's actually happening in the country. And I think that's the piece that's where folks are actually trying to suppress, right? We have history that folks, as Black Lives Matter at School, one of the things that we were pushing is the importance of telling a more robust and critical history of the United States, right? And our experiences here, right, for all people of color, for all people, not just people of color, but for all people. And so that's the counter narrative. Those are the stories, those are the narratives, that's the history that's not often told and taught in schools. So critical race theory is not
I want to just... I just want to stop because I want to thank you so much for that explanation, because I think, that clears up a lot of confusion that people have over, is critical race theory being taught to my fifth grader? The answer is no. Critical race theory is an advanced topic that, pretty much takes place at the graduate level. So explain what is now being taught at lower educational levels. It's not critical race theory. That's too advanced a concept. What exactly is it, and at what education level do you think it's most appropriate for this wider lens, as you say, to be presented?
Yeah, what we're actually seeing happening right now is that folks are taking a more critical look at all of our institutions that were started and created since the foundation of this country. After the murder of George Floyd, the extrajudicial murder of George Floyd, we saw all those uprisings taking place, not only in the nation, but globally. We saw, a Black man murdered on camera, and folks saying to ourselves, these are the institutions that people thought and believed were supposed to protect them. Or these are we thought that this country was a place that was for all people to be seen and heard and valued, and voices valued, and their existence valued. But what we saw was people say, this is not really happening. And folks starting to question it a little bit more. Now, this is not the first time that people have questioned it. This is it's constantly happening all over again, where people are questioning and saying, we're no longer going to take it. And so when we see teachers throughout the country saying and signing up, we've got, folks who are, who are signing up to say they're going to teach Black Lives Matter at school because they want to teach a history that is going to center the humanity of the people that we have most dehumanized. So that's what we're seeing. Is we're seeing a reversal now where folks are they're rejecting the myths that we've often been told. It's like we've been learning the myth that Santa has existed. I hope no children are watching. That Santa has existed all our lives, and now suddenly we're saying and realizing, this is not true. This is not real. It's a myth. So what does it mean for us to transform and understand what's really happening, the history of this country, the founding of this country, so that we can live up to the values that we say that we are?
Right, and all of that makes perfect sense, and yet I think there are a lot of parents who are struggling to understand some of these changes in the curriculum, and they're grasping at, I think, inaccuracies that are obviously being portrayed in the media that about this curriculum. One of the complaints that many, white parents make when they say that their curriculum is expanding in ways that perhaps they're not familiar with and therefore as comfortable with, is that they believe it's making white children, their children, feel guilty about being white. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, what we will say is it's teaching the history, it's teaching an authentic and a more robust history of this nation's founding and the way that this nation has been designed and was started. We don't often hear, I was looking at one of the curriculum that was written a while, not that long ago, a couple of months ago. And it was the way it had described and the way that it referred to Indigenous peoples was in the past tense, as if they did not exist. When they do exist, they're still here. When we're often told the history that they're no longer here, or we don't understand the history of genocide in this country, or the history of dispossession, right? So it's really about all of this is really a distraction, I think, in many ways, and people are grasping to the distraction when we really want to talk about the ways that there's a coordinated and concerted effort to suppress history, to suppress the movement around labor activism, to suppress the understanding of redlining and how it's actually impacted the lives of people of color, all people, right? Eventually, because if I'm a white person living in a segregated white community, I spend my whole life never having to interact with other people until I come outside of that community. And that's not good either for anybody, right? Even the history of redlining, we need to understand these histories, and we can't live in a myth, that this belief that it might make children feel guilty. It has nothing to do with guilt. And we need to start helping our children realize that this is really about understanding the history of this country so that we can become our best selves. Which is why teachers all over the country are signing on to our pledge that we have with this Education Project, saying that they're going to teach the truth. This has nothing to do with guilt, but really to teach about the history of this country.
Thank you so much, Okaikor Aryee-Price. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.